wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong.
Hey everybody, let's go ahead and do a quick for maybe newcomers, different ways you can track something. There are many different ways you can track things, from simple trackers, 2D trackers, to planar trackers, to going into Mocha and doing a power mesh track, to doing a planar track, to doing a 3D track, to going even far as using Face Builder from Keen Tools to kind of track. So there's many different ways to track things. Let's go back with the traditional ones here. This is translation and scale. So you can see we have this movement of this cube here, and I have this little orange cube right here. If I go ahead and just close this up a little bit, you'll see this cube is doing nothing. It's just orange. We're going to affect or change this from this information. So I'm going to go ahead and add a tracker. Good old-fashioned tracker here. The reference frame is very important, so I want to choose the reference frame so that it's the frame where I don't want the original to change, and that in case is this orange box. So I want the box to not change at this frame, so I'm definitely going to, before I do anything, is set my current frame to 14 for the reference frame. And now I'm going to go in here and add a track. So I'll go ahead and add a track, and I'll go ahead and put it right there. And I'm going to want to make, this is the search index here, the area, so I want to make sure this is big enough because you can see this box moves pretty quick. And if I have the, you know, search area here, it's not going to see this corner, so I got to make the search area quick, as you can see here. Alright, so let's go ahead and track this forward, and we'll just go ahead and just use this little guy right here and track forward. So we're getting a good track. And I'm not going to get into such things as, you know, show errors and so forth, so you can see there's different errors. And again, you can come over here and track forwards again, and that maybe will revise the, you know, your results and so forth. But anyway, that's just a simple translation movement. So with any tracker, we can either export a tracker, like we can export a match move like this, and apply that to the box. Okay. Or we can come in here and just physically make this something as an effector. So if we go over here to transform, we could either choose match move or match move 1 point. So match move, obviously, the difference is this one will lock your filter to keys. This one won't, and give you a little bit better result for 1 point tracks. So I'm going to make this a match move. So now this is actually an affecting tool, so I'll have that affect the box. And I'll just merge this on top with this, and we'll take a look what we got. So as you can see, we're getting a translation but not a scale difference. So I'm going to start with this frame here, go to my tracker, and let's add another tracker, and we can make sure this evaluation is off since we've already done the tracking for it. And I'll take this tracker here and put it down over here in the corner, because this goes from a square to a rectangle. So with that said, let's go ahead and track forward, and let me go ahead and make sure that I have this back plugged in here. There we go. And oops, sorry. So we'll go ahead and track that forward. Grab that tracker. Make sure you grab the tracker. Track it forward. There we go. So now we have 2 points of reference that are moving away from each other, and those can be used to establish a transform of scale. So instead of actually making this a match move, we're going to put this to none again, and instead we're going to export out something. So there's 2 ways of doing this. So I'm going to export out a match move and say create. So now we have this transform match move. We'll apply it to this, and we'll put this 2 on top. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So now we should see this. Now nothing's happening because we got to go back to the tracker, and we have to say make this scale orientated. So again, our reference frame, nothing changes, and then we get here, now the scale is matching up. So pretty cool. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and get rid of these here. And again, if you ever want to change the reference frame, so say you want this to be the frame that nothing changes for the box, or this is the starting point for the box, I can come over here to my tracker and say set current frame to the reference frame. So nothing changes on this frame from the original, but you can see it's kind of going backwards, and it's shrinking in accordance to the scale of the other box. So anyway, let's go ahead and get rid of this Good stuff here. And the next one down the line is translation, scale, and rotation. So here you can see we got a little rotation going on. So we will add a tracker, and once again we will set our pivot, our actual, let's go ahead and set this to, losing my brain again here, so go to set current frame, and we'll add a couple trackers in here. So I'll add 1, 2, and that should be good enough. So we're going to do it again, same thing again, put these in the corner, scale them up, make sure you get enough room there for the search to go on. Shift select both of them, and one only has translation on now, that's okay, so we'll just go ahead and just track this forward. And now we're tracking both at the same time. The only thing bad about these two-dimensional trackers, if something goes off the frame or off the scene, then you got a problem. So that's where you want to employ maybe a 3D solve or planar tracking if it's, you can still hold on to it to the very end. So anyway, you can see what we're looking at here, and now if we go ahead and apply this, and we'll just go ahead and just export out a simple match move and hit create, and we'll apply that to the actual cube. Put this at the bottom, and again the tracker here is not doing anything at all, it's just going straight through. That's because it is currently set to none. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we get. So you can see there's nothing going on, there's no scale change, so that means I have to come into my tracker and make sure that the second tracker is used to establish scale. And now you should see scale change. There is no scale change in this object, it's actually just rotating. So I'm going to go ahead and put rotate now, and now you can see the rotation is what it is. So now we got that going. So there you go. We go ahead and delete these goodies. Let's move on to the skew. Okay, so skew is not something that is really going to be established except for a planar tracker. So let's go ahead and create a good old-fashioned roto. Hit the letter O, and we are going to just make a simple shape like this, and we'll go ahead and track it. Okay. So if I come in here and I track this, you can see the options. If I right-click this Bezier and turn it right-click and choose Planar Tracker, it becomes purple. These options come in where we have translation, scale, rotation, and shear. So in this case, we could do just translation. So now it's just translation, and we'll go ahead and track this. So I created this in the middle of the comp, so I'm going to track it forward. And let's see what happens. And then we'll move this back. You can see the keys that are being created here. If I go to if I select the planar tracker, you can see them right here. So these are the automatic keys, all of these, and this is the one handmade key that we created. So I'm going to put my cursor there and just track backwards, and you'll see the tracks start to build up. I'll go ahead and pause so we don't have to wait. Alright, so as you can see, it's not really doing anything except getting the scale figured out upon the physical track itself. So again, you could take this and export it out under tracking to create a corner pin absolute, or a corner pin relative will do create. Okay. And again, what that's going to do is we need to choose a reference frame. So again, we started tracking right here, but I'm going to put my reference frame at frame 14 where nothing changes. So we will come over here and set the current frame to 14. Now I'm going to apply that to the actual cube, and then we'll just merge these on top of each other. And let's see what we get. So you can see there's like a translation going on. It's just basically trying to figure out where it's moving. So that's not going to do us any real good here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to this planar tracker here, and we'll go ahead and delete this completely here. And I'll create another workflow here. We will turn it into another planar, but this time we're going to not turn on perspective, but we'll turn on shear. Okay, so shear is that kind of twisting back and forth. Also, we got scale and rotation. So let's go ahead and play that through. So go ahead and hit play. Now you can see that it's taking into account the shearing, which is sort of like that, you know, italicized moving back and forth, or whatever you call it. I don't know what the technical term is for it. I don't know if it's doing the greatest job here, but we'll find out in a minute. Anyway, might be doing a good job. I don't know. We'll find out. Usually, you know, so you can see there's the information, and now we apply that to this. So here's our cube, and now it's like, whoa, what happened here, right? We have the reference frame. Let's go ahead and see what has happened. So if I take a look, I'm going to go ahead and export this corner pin out because it's not doing it according to the planar tracker we're using last time. So I'll go ahead and create, plug that in, merge it. All right, let's see what we got. So yeah, I mean, not too bad. You can see that the shear is being considered. Finally, let's go ahead and I'll go ahead and delete this, and we'll delete this. And again, because we have to retract this each time, we're going to start to work in perspective. Okay, so if we come over here and let's go ahead and jump over to this side here. So this is a perspective it's moving, and then there's a perspective change, as you can see. So let's go ahead and see what happens if we just track like translation, scale, rotation, and shear. So again, I'll come over here, create a new shape, blah blah blah, and I will make this a planar. And again, this right here is, you know, we created this on this frame, so that will be our actual frame. That is our reference frame. So I'll go ahead, and again, you can come over here and change that. Say go to reference frame, or set the current frame to reference frame. So I'm going to go ahead and hit track forward, and I'll go ahead and hit pause. And I forgot to turn off perspective. I just want to show you guys what happens if you just track it without perspective on. So we'll go ahead and just go ahead and track this. So now it's tracking in accordance to like our last demonstration, but we don't have perspective on. So we're going to see how this physically happens. Remember, this is basically creating 4 corner pins. It's not actually creating like a grid warp, you know, where there's different bendings. It's basically 4 different points that bend together. And it's really meant for planar surfaces, perfectly flat surfaces, not for round surfaces. So there you can see the results, and it is not taking, it's just taking in effect the reality of that. So I'm going to go ahead, put this back to perspective. Now we'll go ahead, as you switch this to perspective, you'll find that you'll get a lot faster tracking errors and issues. It's just more unstable, whereas sometimes you just want to track translation, scale, and rotation through the whole process, and it becomes sort of like an averaging of the area within the actual roto shape. So, you know, I found that sometimes you could use that because it's basically taking the averaging transformation of all the different points within the actual area versus one single point, and that can be helpful sometimes. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we got. You can see it looking pretty good. So with that said, we can take this and export out a relative and create. And again, if you're ever curious, if you click on the corner pin, you can see where the corner pins are at. Okay, there's nothing really magical about this. It's not like an animated grid. It's actually just 4 points. Okay. And again, it's meant for things that are flat or flat-ish in a plane surface. You can see it's matching to that perspective, which is kind of cool. And again, depending on what you set your reference frame to, so if I say no affecting right here, I can come to my corner pin under tracking and set this to the current frame, the end. Now it's warping out off the frame. So let's go to the middle frame and set the current frame, so you can start to see what's going on here. So we'll come back to this frame, set the current frame. Now we're getting a nice perspective change across the whole workflow. Now it's always, this is extrapolating information way over here for something that's way over here, and it's really not a good idea to do something like that. In fact, it's probably a better idea to, if I come to this actual cube here, to get this, it should be intentionally better off in here. You can get some really shaky results on stuff a little bit too far from the, it's sort of extrapolating the information out here, but you can get shaky results out here. In the same way trackers can get shaky results to very close things of the camera during a track that weren't tracked in the actual tracker. So whatever you're going to, whatever you're going to put somewhere, make sure you're tracking the area from which the object will actually be sitting. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we got now, and now you can see that's giving us more stable results. In this scene, I'm simulating parallax, and parallax is the common reality that things further away, like a mountain range, are going to be, if the camera is physically moving from left to right or panning, the objects in the background won't move as dramatically in translation as the objects in the foreground. So you can see, like right here, that this object's moving a lot quicker. In the same way as if you're driving by something with a car and you're looking out the driver's side or passenger side window, this is what you would see, very fast moving. If this is a cow or something, and then over here is the mountains, this is what you would commonly see. So sometimes when you're doing a scene, you might want to physically put something between the two distances, and you want to average those two distances between two objects. That can be helpful if you can't track something. Like, for instance, let's say that there was like an ocean with waves kicking up right here, but yet you wanted to place something out in the ocean, but you couldn't track the ocean. So how would you do that? Well, you could do a 3D track. That's probably the most understandable way. But the reality is you would probably want to come over here and just use a tracker, and I'll get this little area of the mountain that has enough contrast. I'll add another tracker, put that right here, and it should be enough contrast there. I think I gotta make sure there's enough information there. So I'll grab both of these and we will track forwards. So you can see one is moving a little bit faster than the other, obviously because of the parallax. So let's go ahead and let this sit for a second. Go all the way through. Alright. So now we can see the results that we have here. Now if we wanted to average that between the two, you could take translation data of these two here. You could say average tracks. Now you have a track here. We'll not evaluate these two. And now you have a new track, as you can see here, which is basically an average between tracks. So the parallax would make sense. So if we apply this to we'll just take this and turn this into a match move, and we'll have it be an effector to the orange box. And I'll put this at the bottom and the top, and we'll see what we got. So you can start to see how, in parallax reasoning, this is a quick and dirty way to do many things. It could be to create just a simple garbage roto shape. Again, 3D tracks would be best if what is between the cow and the mountains is an actual ocean that's wobbling up, like the waves are kicking up, and it's like I can't track that. This is a nice way of getting an average of something out there without doing a 3D solve. So this is going to be kind of covering jitter. So here you can see I went ahead and tracked something that's a little bit jittery, mostly in the translation Y shape. So you can actually come here, and you can see here I'm going to turn this off to none for now, and I'm going to export this out. You can't export out jitter as like a node. You just have to make your tracker a jitter or a remove jitter tool. So you can obviously do a stabilize. So I can export a stabilize tool here, and with that I could apply the same information to the jitter, and now you can see it's offsetting the animation to keep it centered. So let me go ahead and take this and remove it. And so really you have to have the tracker there if you want to use it as a tool to remove jitter or add jitter. So we'll remove jitter. And now if we go ahead and take a look at things through, if I just look through the tracker here, you can see that the jitter period is set to 1. And the jitter period is basically the averaging of frames. In other words, it's only averaging 1 frame, so really nothing is changing. But if I start to average, say, a couple frames, remember, this is not just averaging frames going from left, up and down, left and right, and these sort of like small iterations, but large iterations as well. So if I increase this jitter period really high, you can see this object's moving backwards. This little ramp here, you can see if I go ahead and just ramp it up, you can see this scale of this is the reverse operation. So don't be confused by these points here. This is the reverse operation, and because it's longer, it's actually keeping it from reaching all the way to the right, because it's averaging not just X translation, but Y as well. So you can see it's not moving at all. It's not really moving at all too much. So if you want to, you can set this to just 12 iterations, and it's going to average 12. So you might get a little bit of shaking. In this case, if we put this down to like 4 frames, you'll still see a little bit of movement, but it's literally like kind of moving up a hill, so to speak. So it depends on how much you want. And the good thing is you can always average this heavily, and if you wish, you can go back to this frame, which I've set the current frame for the reference frame. And you can take the translation X, right click, say delete keys, and then the translate, actually you could say no animation. There we go. And you could do no animation for the X, and now you can see that it's getting all the way to the end, but it's only taking the shaking of the up and down. So those are little, tricks you can use, obviously. So pretty cool stuff. So you can also come in here and instead of remove jitter, you can do add jitter. So I'll go ahead and hit add jitter, and this is now a jitter creator node, and I'll add that to the box. So you remember the box is doing nothing, but now I have this jitter motion that's been added, as you can see. And then again, I can take the jitter period here and change it to 1, and that's only going to you can see if you look at the options here, it says number of frames to average together to get the stable position. And if you go crazy, you can see it's going to start conforming to the jitter completely. So if you just want a little bit, you come in here. You can also do this if it's translation, rotation, and scale as well. If there's change in scale, jittering, or rotation jittering, sorry, you can actually increase this as well. So you can see I could even smooth this a little bit. And now I'll go ahead and play it. It's a little bit smoother. So that's a lot of the basics of what you would see in the atypical tracker node. So here we have a shot of Evan, and he is getting interactive lighting, which can be tricky. The two things that are tricky is we're trying to track something that's very round, such as his face, at least the curvature, and then you're having interactive lighting that's the hue is changing, and that's actually changing up anything that could be trackable. We try to put this through a bandpass, and again, the planar tracker inside of Nuke does a good job in most cases, but when it comes to difficult situations like this, you might want to consider going into such programs as Mocha Pro. So you can see how just like the luminance is like changing everything, and something's going to try to grab that. It better be very general. You can see like just this and this is going to be a bit tricky, but just making a couple changes to the bandpass should do a good job. So now I'm going to go ahead and come in here and try to track his face here, and even use his ear. I really needed something to grab a hold of that's relatively large and contrasty. So I'm going to go ahead and put this to planar tracker, and then I'm in the middle of the shot, so I'll just track backwards. And you can see it might actually jump. It might jump, and it might jitter, and it might freak out, but we're just going to go ahead and play it through and just see how well it does. If I just tried to track this area here, it would be jumping all over the place. So I really got to grab a hold of stuff that is, pretty strong. So I'm going to go ahead and track this forward. And again, we're going to try to go into Mocha Pro and see if we can get, you can see it's already jumping. And again, that's why some people prefer the Mocha Pro workflow. Through power meshes and so forth. So not the greatest, but you got to remember when you're dealing with planar, hence the word plane, it's a plane. So whenever you try to put, say, a tattoo on this, so if I come back to frame 14 and I take this and I create a corner pin relative, and I take the corner pin and put the reference frame to this frame here. So here you can see I've put this sticker here, so I'll put the corner pin in. And now I'll go ahead and play it through. It's going to jump, obviously, but you can see it feels like a sticker, a flat sticker that's perfectly flat. It's not curved or anything like that. It's trying to stick to Evan's face, besides the fact that the tracking isn't really the best. So one of the other solutions that one can do is smart vectors. So here I have the file of Evan. I put in a smart vectors tool. If you go take a look at the smart vectors, you'll get this crazy psychedelic reality, which will give you information you can use to track something onto a curvature-like surface. So we'll go back to this, and we will do export write, and we will write out a EXR file, and we'll go ahead and get rid of that. And with that, I've went ahead and rendered them out, and now I read them back in, so it's good to render out your smart vectors. And then with the vector distort, I can set my reference frame again to frame 14, so set to the current, and I'll throw it on there. There we go, and I'll throw the source in there, and that's going to obviously keep it there, and then it's going to warp it on his face. So just give it some time to calculate. And let's go ahead and put it through. Now you can see it's sticking, and again, depending on what you set this at, if you the blur size, if you find it kind of like bending into real wavy formats or forms as it deforms, you can bring this up and it'll kind of keep it constrained from getting all wavy and crazy, especially if you have wrinkled clothing. Let's go ahead and just play that and see how that looks. And that's holding on pretty good, and you're getting that sense of curvature as opposed to the planar tracker, which really didn't have it. You can see he is distorting a little bit at the end there, but it's a little bit better than what we had. And again, you can always come in here and add motion blur and all that fun stuff to this. So anyway, but that's just basically another way. And it's really, really good, but it's very limited because things can get kind of crazy with them with the motion vectors if you allow things to whip around too much and so forth. At the same kind of breath, I could come over here and, you know, transform this guy over here. Let's actually go to this frame here, and you can see if I go ahead, I'll disable the grid, and I just take him. I'll throw him up here or something, and you know what happens then. You know, look at how crazy this gets. You know, if I go ahead and play it through, it's like, whoa, you know. And if I take my blur size down to nothing, now you can see how it starts to get a lot more wavy, but it's still kind of cool. I mean, it's holding up there. Again, if you take the blur size, bring it up way up, it starts to get more planar, like it holds itself together, but it starts to get kind of wonky. So maybe a mid reality of 12 or something. This is good for wrinkly shirts that are waving in the wind. There's not enough detail there, and again, you can kind of play with this. You can go back to your reference frame and just put it in different areas. You know, like what if you were going to put a sticker on his, you know, shirt or something. Let's put it right in the middle here and see what happens. See how crazy this gets. And again, you can come over here and try to alleviate that by bringing the blur size up pretty heavily. Let's see if you put this up to something crazy like 60. Oh, you can only go high as 32. So there. So again, you can see how it is kind of weird because it's fighting two different vectors. So again, I could come over here, kind of stick it in there and see if it, let's see what happens. It's always fun to play with the vectors. They're always a blast to mess around with. There's not enough tracked detail in here to pull this off. So if I put this blur size down to nothing, you can see how crazy it's getting. So here we are in Mocha Pro, and I'm just going to New Project, Import Clip, Choose, and I'm choosing the frame range here and hitting OK. And here's our clip, so you can see if I go ahead and play it through. I'm going to find the frame where it's basically facing the closest towards camera, which will probably be like right about there. And I'll grab the X-spline here, and we'll just go ahead and we're going to go around, even in the areas where it's outside of the area that we want to track. So like that, and then I'll right-click. And let's go ahead and track this. So we're going to go over to our Stabilize. And under our Stabilize, you will see, or I'm sorry, our track, you'll see different options here for perspective. This goes a little further in actually creating a mesh. So kind of think of it as a very rudimentary version of, say, you know, Keen Tools, where you actually create a 3D mesh, except theirs is way more robust. So you can go ahead and choose Mesh, and you can see the mesh creates itself. Now, because this is a face, we want to go ahead and make a couple options here. So we want to make sure that our generation mode is set to uniform, and we'll say generate mesh. So now it's going to grab all that to create a physical 3D mesh as we kind of do this. And I think that should do it. I'm pretty sure we'll deal with adaptive contrast just to get a little bit more contrast to help it kind of work itself in, and then we'll track forward by hitting the T right here as opposed to just the play. So we're actually in the middle of the clip here, so we'll track forward. And we'll just push back, and obviously we have this area here left to render, so we'll hit the T to go backwards. So now you see we have a 3D mesh that we can export. So we're going to do export track, and it'll be a limbic file, which is basically a geometric file in the form of a series of image sequences. and that's our reference frame 14. So I'll go ahead and save it, and I'll put that in Tool Time and Nuke PM Elimilic and hit save. So here we've went ahead and hit R for read and brought in Limbic ABC. You can go ahead and just hit open. It'll ask, do you want the layer itself and the camera? You could say create an all ones. You'll get a camera and you'll get a geo. So if you take a look at the geo, again, it is flat. See that? It is a planar type surface. And you have the camera as well, so if you kind of take a look, it is what it is. Again, I could take this and put this under wireframe so you can kind of see what it is. It's moving, and then there's the camera recording it. So what I did was I simply made a scanline renderer, applied the material to the Alembic, and you could see if I take a look, we have the little guy in there assigned on that plane. And go ahead and put it on Evan here, and voila! Again, it still has that feel of two-dimensionality. Again, if you were going to choose, I'd either use keying tools or maybe a little bit easier in time shooting for smart vectors and so forth, because you can see it's not perfect, and it feels like it's just a flat card, almost like a play card, like a playing card, just kind of stuck on his face. It's still flat, it's not curving along the edge of his face. So before we do keying tools, you could also do a three-dimensional solve in this scene right here with Evan. So for instance, if I go ahead and just play the footage, you can see I went ahead and add another bandpass to, again, get some bite in there. I've also rotoed out this area so that we're going to do a face track, not the environment track. And I put that to the mask input, and I set this to mask inverted alpha, and then under my settings, you can see under my preview features, it's going to just track the inside of his face. So I put 200 tracks and a little lower threshold, and then we'll go ahead and just track the shot and see what happens here. So now we have all these track points, and we could also, in this circumstance, I'm not going to stick with any lens distortion for now, but I will go ahead and just do a simple solve. And we have a solve with an error rate of 2.71, which is not the greatest. We could refine this, but I'm just going to go ahead and do a scene plus and say create. And now we have a, oops, we did include lens distortion. So anyway, let's go ahead and take a look at what we got. If we go to our scene here and back up, you can see that we have points and we have a camera that's moving in accordance to the points, but you know, if this is his face, it makes no sense, as you can see. So there's not enough detail there to figure out, you know, how and then we could have taken these point clouds and created a mesh and then use that to project on, but in this circumstance, it's something that if we had more detail and less flashing lights, we wouldn't have any problems. So here I just created a basic camera that is set to 50mm, and I have my good old bandpass, and we're finally going to go to face builder, face tracker. So you got to first build the face. It's the keying tools. We interviewed these guys a little bit back, and plug that in and say center geo, and this is important that you get these points on pretty good. And I'll go ahead and put this neck down here. So like that, and then I go back to the air, I go back to the nose, like that, and let's try to get this a little bit better. There we go. Now I'll finally start to add a couple more points that start to bring in the deformation reality in the scene, and we'll get the eyes in there. And it's going to start to conform itself pretty nicely. I'll try to grab the points that I've already pushed already, so it's a good idea to kind of use those points first before you commit to trying to create a face. So get the corners of the lips and get those in there. Again, try to get the nose. Try to use the points that you previously have been using, so to speak. You see the blue is the eyebrow, so you want to get that in there. So I'm going to try to conform this. It's trying to figure out the angle as best as it possibly can. So I'm trying to kind of manipulate this as best I can. It's tricky. It's kind of fighting itself a little bit. And it is harder when you have flashing footage because it's going to have to try to track the footage. So I'm going to try to get that in there. So not perfect, but you know, hey, it's worth it. Now we're going to go to a profile shot as best we can. So frame 14 would probably be a good idea, and then we can just start again, grab the eye. It's just basically modeling the head. That's what it's doing. You can see he's getting a little too. And just by the parallax differential of these two angles, it's going to know how to kind of conform, model the face accordingly to match up with Evan's features. And so yeah, I mean we can go another round, but I think that's good enough. Alright, so this is the part of the video that I did. I'm doing a revision. Somebody wrote in the comment section, hey, you did the face tracker wrong. You were setting keyframes before doing tracking. So I haven't used this in a while, so thank you for that correction, and I'm going to show you how to do it correctly. Thank you guys for taking the time to look at the you know, information I'm giving you, and the professionals out there saying, no, this is how you do it. Use that comment section, please, to just help myself. That way I can help others. So anyway, so let's go ahead and make the face tracker node. These tools are incredible. I would say of the top couple of tools that you should definitely buy is definitely Keen Tools, and also obviously Need Video. That's so needed more than anything, especially if you're doing cleanup work. Face Builder, Face Tracker through Keen Tools is just as important as 3D tracking, in my opinion. So anyway, I'll plug in the camera, I'll plug in the geo, which is my face builder node, which is the rough model of Evan, which we could have done a better job, but again, I'm just going to throw it in there. And I'll put the background in so it establishes the resolution. So now, I'll put my viewer to the face tracker node, and here's Evan. And what I'll do is, I'm going to hit center geo here, and I'll bring up my brightness a little bit so we can kind of see things a little bit better. Our only issue here is the fact that Evan is going to be basically, he's going to be, there's flashing light here. It's going to be hard for the tracker to get a hold of Evan. So we are going to employ the bandpass in this situation. So again, I'm going to go ahead and turn that on, and that's going to give us these details. And again, you can go in here and try to pull out the micro, macro, medium, large, and small details so that you get something that the tracker can bite into. The first thing with the face tracker node is you have to create an analysis file and have it analyze the image. So I'm going to click here. I'll choose you know, image.precalc. Just type .precalc, and then you just need that in there, and then you just hit analyze, and then I'm going to do the input between 14 and 43. So that's going to analyze the image. You cannot do any tracking until you have this analysis file available. Now you might be thinking at this point, like, oh, there's a lot of steps, blah, blah, blah. I'll just planar track it. No, no, trust me, you want to use this tool. It's very, very awesome. Okay, so now that we have done that, I'm going to go ahead and start my first position. I'm going to disable my bandpass just for now. And again, I'm going to use least amount of points as possible. I always stick with the nose, and I'll put this like right where it should belong here. And I usually work with 3 points, which will deal with scale first. So right now, my face builder node, I'm going to turn on, I turned these off earlier, nose, mouth, upper face, so I can get, or actually, I'm sorry, turn on everything. Turn it all on. And if you have any movements of the eyes opening and closing, or the mouth opening and closing, make sure non-neutral expressions is on, which is pretty friggin' amazing. So anyway, let's go to the face tracker, take that single point, get it right there, and then I'm going to start to swing this around. So grab this chin point, I know it belongs right there. And then I can start to, I'll grab the chin, then you'll start to see it start to swing around. So like that. And again, I want to take these 3 points and use them to conform this as best as I possibly can without having to add more points, because I think after 3 points you start to get into just deformation versus a scale establishment, so to speak. Okay, so again, the chin wasn't the perfectly modeled chin we did in the face builder. That's my fault, but again, you can see I'm just trying to get things roughly situated in here. And you see we're still getting a heavy level of deformation going on here, just to conform the brows with the light blue color. And I don't worry about the neck. I'm only worried about making sure this is accurate. So don't kill yourself by bending the neck area. Unless you're putting tattoos down there, then add some keyframes, or points, I should say. So again, I'm going to do that, and then I'll add some points for the mouth here. There we go. That's pretty good. Again, the mistake I made before was I was just moving over here and changing the tracking points, but in this case, you actually physically track. So I'm going to track to start. And it did a halfway decent job, but obviously it drifted a little bit. And then I just want to use the points I already have established. I don't want to add more points just yet. And I want to make sure that these are kind of there correctly. And I'll go ahead, and I probably want to add just one more point. But just take the time to remove and remove these same points, and then you can start to decide, okay, maybe at this point I want to add one more point there, maybe one more point here, and like that. And maybe in the eyes are always good, but again, I'm trying to not create a crap load of points. Okay, and let's see here, that's good. And then between these two keyframes, I want to refine it. So you can see the chin doesn't really match up. So I'm going to allow it to refine. So I'm going to turn on my bandpass now. It's time for the computer. I'll just say refine, and that's going to only refine the two keyframes that I created. And we could see that it did a decent job. Let's go ahead and take a look. I'll turn off my bandpass, and we could see that. And whenever there's a flash, you're going to see a jump. You see that? Now, why is that? Obviously, if I go back to the bandpass and see between these two frames, things change dramatically here. You guys see that? So it's the flashing that's, in this case, causing me the headache. And again, I could try to adjust the bandpass so that it doesn't take into account so much the luminance change. You can see it definitely makes a pop there. So it's going back to the tool here. I'll turn off the bandpass here, and let's just move forward with this. So again, I'll just come over here. You can see the jump. The lighting changes. There's a jump. See that? So you can add keyframes here. So just before things pop, you can add a keyframe, and then you can move to the next frame, and then conform it. You have to like tell the computer like, no, you're off the map there. So I'm using my arrow keys. I'm trying to, and you're rarely ever going to have this situation with Keen Tool, so don't be like frustrated by what you're seeing, because this is me doing a very difficult scene that has interactive lighting in it. So don't judge Keen Tools by this shot, so to speak. Seems like do I have a double frame there? Something weird going on there. Anyway, so I'll just do refine all. Let's see if that's going to do the in-betweens. But these are the individual keyframes. So I might start to delete keyframes. So I'll come over here and say delete this keyframe. These are the ones I redefined. So if you get a flash, you might have to come in here and really define this yourself. And I'm not sure if I'm getting a double. Let me go to my original footage. I don't know how I would have gotten a double frame there. No, there's no double frames. Look like a 3-2 pull down thing going on there. There we go. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. You want to look, this is the area we're tracking, so we want to be careful to see if there's change. We can see there is a slight change. Like if you look at this vertex here, it is changing. So we might have to, it might still be an issue. I don't know, maybe not. We could add a point on here and look for like an artifact on his face. So for instance, if we go to this frame, right, maybe he has a mole right here. If I just click right there, that's sort of an, you know, a point, and then I could just force the mole up here. So now let's see if that helps the situation. And actually it does. Having some kind of like high contrast thing like a mole can help figure it out. So now we can move forward with this by tracking forward again. Again, this interactive lighting is really going to screw us up, just FYI, unfortunately. And again, his ear is still, you know, I should have refined this ear here, so I'll pull this ear this way. Not that it matters, but, you know. There we go. All right, so let's go ahead and track forward. And when the light shift changes drastically, like it just did, when it went to blue, yellow to blue, you'd see the jump. See that? So this is something that, again, is only to this situation. Most situations you will not have this issue. But in this case, we can come in here and we can go, okay, so I'm going to set a keyframe right before the lighting adjustments. And then I'll refine this area here before I make my manual keyframe somewhere here. So I'll just do refine. It'll go between these two areas. So now we can see we're looking for any jump, and it's looking pretty solid. And I'm not worried too much. I mean, if I come in here, I can, you know, add another keyframe to get the eyes if I'm worried about if I'm ever going to do something with the eyes in the future here. And again, I can just do refine again. And don't forget to turn on the band pass too. Sometimes the band pass can hurt you in this situation because of the lighting change. Sometimes you want to have kind of dull lighting going on. In this case, it's solving pretty good. Okay. So now the question is, you know, we have this jump, right? So I'm going to go ahead and add a keyframe here. And let's go ahead and see if I can reconform this. So here you can see this has jumped. So I'm going to pull it down a little bit. And still there is this kind of shift. So I'm going to pull this back. And the mouth is way off. And let's see here. It's also changing the chin, I noticed. Like, you'll see. I gotta pull the chin down. And I'm just using my arrow keys back and forth. Purposely throwing this model off. Let's see. Just subtle left and rights. And then finally, we can go ahead and see if there's a jump now. Yeah, it's still a jump. And I don't know what it is, something weird with must be my video card or something, because it's not showing a frame or something. So now if I kind of push it back, there we go. So pull this up again. A little bit of movement there, a little bit. But notice, see the keyframe is not changing? It's kind of irritating. Like it's the same frame. Maybe it isn't, I don't know, let's see. Bring this up. Most of the time, again, you will not have this issue with Keen Tools. So again, do not judge Keen Tools by an interactive flashing scene, but this is good for you to see how you can kind of tackle these difficult shots. So I'm kind of looking at using my arrow keys before and after. Yeah. You don't want to have any jump in the footage. And at this point I can go ahead and track forward again now that I've made that keyframe. And then now that we're at the end, we can kind of put in the final, you know, kind of final revision here. Get this going here. And if you want, you could start to forcibly add another keyframe there. And at the end of the, you know, when you get to the end of this, you know, again, try to use the keyframes you already created. But when you get near the end, you can come in here and start playing around, adding a couple more points for specific, you know, workflow. And I get the chin going on there. And see what this, and move this down here. And again, I'll refine it again, refine between the two keyframes. And see how it looks. Yeah, we got another wonderful pop. Isn't that great? because of the, so again, I'll set a keyframe, go ahead one, and gonna force it to, and I'm really looking at this area because this is where I'm going to be putting the tattoo. There's his mole, so I can see that his mole, this needs to back up a little bit here. And for some reason, I don't know why, I gotta put viewer somewhere else and put it back to the face tracker because it doesn't update that frame. It's kind of irritating. Not sure what's doing that. It looks like it's holding on. Could be wrong. I'm not really worried about anywhere in the face except, you know, any jump except somewhere like down here. So here's his nose. I think that's pretty decent. Alright, so let's just go ahead and do refine all. Take everything into account. And with that said, let's see what we got. And hit play. Now watching it at 24 frames per second can be deceiving because you don't see the jumps. So if you put this somewhere around 10 frames per second, you'll start to see if there's any sudden jump. Again, my eyeballs are looking here for any jump or jitter. And there's a little bit of wobbling going on here, but I'm not too worried about it. There are jumps and jitters going on here, but I'm not worried about the fact that it goes off the eyes up here. I'm really just worried about this area right here because this is where the tattoo's going. Yeah, there is a little bit of a wobbly. See the wobbliness there going on? Yeah, it's a little bit wobbly. So, I mean, there's different things that you can do. I find sometimes you can delete keys. So if I delete this key, and then I delete this key after the refinement happened, you'll get a smoother result. I wouldn't refine it again because the refinement will take into account the jump again with the color. But once you did that, delete the keys and then don't refine it again because it's going to catch on to that weird shift of blue and white. And then you'll, you know, so this, now that I look at it, it's still a little bit wobbly there. You can see it a little bit wobbly, but that's okay. Yeah, it depends. Let's see what happens. Let's go back to 24 frames per second here and play it through. Okay, so now that we've done that, what I have is a Project 3D node connected to my original footage, set to the camera, and then I just do an apply material, and then what you get is Evan. So you get this kind of creepy. He's got a bigger nose. It tells you we didn't model him correctly. He's got elf ears because I didn't model the ears correctly. It would probably be a good idea if you're going to have an actor that's in the scene, and you know, if you have the same millimeter lens or something, just shoot another take where you tell the actor, if you know they're going to be face tracked, which is probably never, you have them do like a footage where they face towards the camera and then they do a profile, and that way you have a couple of different, a lot of parallax and difference there, so you can model them with the actual face builder node. So we come over here to the scanline render. Scanline render set to UVs. So if I go ahead and take a look at it, back in the 2D, it's a big mess. I'm going to go back to my face builder and remove areas I don't need. I don't need the ear. I don't need the scalp or the nose. Maybe the nose. The neck. I don't need the neck. And you can choose butterfly, legacy, spherical, or max face. Okay, I like butterfly or spherical. That's just me. I also changed the reformatted it to be a square image here. You can also plug that in through the background if you wish. It's stretching the data, so you can see right now we get this creepy movement of this face, and you want to keep your eye on this area. You can see even though we did tracking, we're still getting this kind of warpage going on. So these are the areas that are very safe, the areas that are not moving much. This looks like a horror movie. But anyway, we're going to use vectors to track that wavy information. So what I do is I go ahead and come over here in my smart vectors, and I render out the smart vectors. So this is the smart vector information. I write them out with the EXR sequence, and then I read those in. So here's the tattoo. Here's the transform. I put a transform before it, and I go ahead and vector distorted, so now it's getting that vector information. If I put the merge node on and I disable the shuffle node is set to black, 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 and black for red, green, blue, alpha to establish the resolution. So now if I go ahead and take a look and play it through, I have to go ahead and come over here and rewrite out my, let me go ahead and render out my vectors again here. Okay, now that I've updated the vectors, I'll go to my read node and hit reload. And let's see what we got. So you can see it's almost like sticking to the wobbliness of the scene. And it may look a little erratic here, but if we go into, if I disable the shuffle node, now all we have is the sticker here, and we'll just render it so you can see what it is. I apply this material, so here we have the UV space. I apply this material to the original mesh again, and now if we go ahead and take a look at it in 3D space, we have the sticker on there, and we can transform it if we wish and move it around. So again, you could, doesn't matter where you put it. So if I come over here and disable this, I could take the transform node and stick this thing anywhere in the face, and it should conform. You know, if I go ahead and just play it through, you can see things are getting a little bit wacky out here, obviously, but you know, you could stick it on his eyeball if you want. But this is where we wanted to stick this little guy. Anyway, and then we come into the scanline render. Scanline render is simply just rendering out the camera. You know, here's the camera. The scanline render is just rendering it out, and now we have this information from the still. Obviously, we don't want Evan's face, so I'm going to go ahead and disable this shuffle node. So now all we do is get the alpha of the object, and then I will merge this. And now, again, no color correction, no motion blur, no depth of field, no grain, but it's now something we could use. You know, we kind of have in the scene. So there you go. Now, is it perfect? No. You can come over here and affect, you know, adjust the blur size, so that'll kind of keep any jitteriness out a little bit. If it's getting too jittery, you might want to kind of put it in the middle, somewhere around 10. So yeah. And then of course you can come into your scanline render and you could start playing with such things as samples to get some motion blur going on, and adjust the shutter depending on how much motion blur is going on in the scene. You could also use vectors, whatever you want. So now we can go ahead and just play it through. And again, there's one more reality of tracking throughout this situation. We have a tutorial coming up with Eddie Porter. I can't wait to have Eddie on, guys. He's got an insane amount of experience in the latest and greatest major motion pictures, and he worked on Godzilla versus King Kong and all that. Finally, again, please buy Evan a coffee. I think we had about 20-some people buy coffee at the beginning of this whole campaign, and it's kind of dropped off. So please support Evan. If you support Evan, you'll see more videos from me. So please contribute. Thank you.